Hiya, folks. I got a question recently, and it's a question I get all the time, and it's a question I've addressed on this YouTube channel before, maybe more than once, and it's a question I've written blogs about and written pieces in my books about, and it seems to be a favorite. It seems to come up all the time anyway. No matter how many times you answer it, somebody asks it again. And it's, what should I do inside my head when I'm doing Zazen? For those of you who might not have heard the spiel before, I'll give it to you. The type of Zazen we do... What is going on with my hair? The type of Zazen we do in Dogen's lineage is called Shikantaza. And Shikantaza is just a fancy Japanese word for just sitting. And as I say every time I explain this, when Dogen says just sitting, he doesn't mean just sitting. Yeah, I'm just sitting. That's all I'm doing. I'm just sitting. It means just sitting. The just in just sitting is represented by a Chinese character that comes from an image of a hammer hitting a nail right on top of the head. These days, it doesn't look much like a hammer hitting a nail, but if you know the history of it, that's what it is. So it means just sitting, like doing nothing but sitting. And one explanation Dogen gives for what to do in your head when doing Zazen is contained in Volume 1 of Nishijima and Cross's translation of Shobogenzo, although technically it is not part of Shobogenzo, and it is a little fan favorite called Fukan Zazengi, Universal Guide to the Standard Method of Zazen. And in this, I'm not going to read the whole thing for you, although maybe I should do a video where I do that. But he goes on and on about what to do physically in Zazen, but when he talks about what to do mentally in Zazen, he really only gives a few words. He says, for example, we should cease the intellectual work of studying sayings and phrases. We should learn the backward step of turning light and reflecting, or turning the light around and reflecting it inward is sometimes how it's pronounced or translated. Not pronounced. Body and mind will naturally fall away, and the original features will manifest themselves before us. If we want to attain the matter of the ineffable, we should practice the matter of the ineffable at once. Then we hear, cast aside all involvements. I'm kind of skipping over all the things that give you advice on physical practice and concentrating on the mental stuff. Do not think of good and bad. Do not consider right and wrong. Stop the driving movement of mind, will, consciousness. Cease intellectual consideration through images, thoughts, and reflections. Do not aim to become a Buddha. How could this be connected with sitting or lying down? Then we get a long, long passage about what to do physically, and that's important. He really, really stresses. He spends a lot more time talking about the posture and stuff. And then the last little bit of advice he gives about what to do mentally is, when the physical posture is already settled, make one complete exhalation and sway left and right, sitting immovably in the mountain-still state. Think about this concrete state beyond thinking. How can the state beyond thinking be thought about? It is different from thinking. This is just the pivot of Zazen. And that is really all the advice he gives you about what to think about, what to do inside your head when doing Zazen. So when people hear this advice, they're like, well, how can I think the thought of not thinking? What does the thought of not thinking mean? Or they'll ask me, as my questioner did recently, should I scan my body? Should I, people have other questions, should I label my thoughts? Should I count my breath? All sorts of questions like that. And as I was answering this guy's email, it struck me that there's a reason that these explanations are so vague. And the reason is, and it kind of comes up every time I try to give another lecture or do another video or do another blog or do another chapter in a book explaining what to do in Shikantaza inside your head, is that every time you explain more about what to do inside your head during Shikantaza, it seems to get less and less like Shikantaza. You know, it gets less and less like just sitting and more like a set of specific instructions on what to do. Now, a lot of people are used to guided meditations in which somebody is actually talking while you're meditating and telling you to concentrate on your head, now concentrate on your teeth, and now concentrate on your shoulders, and now, this and that. And they go through a whole spiel about what to think about during Zazen, or what to kind of pay attention to or scan. And that we just don't do that in the Soto style of Zazen. In the Rinzai style of Zazen, you'll often be given a koan, a thing like mu, like what is, let's see, does a dog have Buddha nature? Does Ziggy the pup have a Buddha nature? And the answer is mu. Well, here's a hint for you. That's a pun. In Japanese, it's mu, but in Chinese, the same character is pronounced wu. And woo is the sound in Chinese that a dog makes, when instead of woof, like we say it, woo. And actually, one thing about Ziggy Pup that's weird is he actually says woof sometimes. And I always criticize him when he does that because he sounds like a person imitating a dog. But he actually says woof. And I'm like, not every time. He has different barks, but some of them sound just like a person pronouncing the word woof. It's weird. But my point is about shikantaza is that every time I end up trying to answer somebody's question about what to do in Zazen, I ended up giving them an instruction which, to me, seems less like shikantaza. So the recommendations that Dogen gives, vague as they are, is about all you can say. So let's look at them again. Cease the intellectual work of studying sayings and chasing words. So that kind of, there's a school of Soto Zen, they call themselves Soto Zen, who wants to do koans during Zazen, and I just think, well, you read that and you're like, well, how could you do koans if you're ceasing the intellectual work of studying sayings and chasing words? But anyway, that's what Dogen says. We should learn the backward step of turning light and reflecting. To me, that is also similar to the instructions that are given sometimes in Advaita, as asking who am I, or concentrating on the thought I am. Just kind of look at what's going on internally. Turn the light inward and reflect. Body and mind will naturally fall away and the original features will manifest themselves before us. Well, see, that's another one of these vague statements, and don't think that for the people that heard this in the 800 years ago that was perfectly clear. No, it was probably about as clear to them as it is to you, except that they might have been familiar with that as something they say in Buddhism, but no more than that. Cease intellectual consideration through images, thoughts, and reflections. Do not aim at becoming a Buddha. Think the concrete state beyond thinking. How can beyond thinking be thought about? It is different from thinking. And the only little hint I have for you is that the word here translated as thinking, which almost everybody can translate as thinking, is shiryo. And shiryo in Japanese gives more of a feeling of pondering or considering. Consideration is normally how shiryo would be translated. And for some reason it's the standard, even Nishijima Roshi followed it, to translate it as thinking when talking about Dogen. But it's more like consideration. So it means deliberate consideration of thoughts, instead of just the thoughts that pop into your mind, without reason. Those are not anything to worry about. And I believe I read a passage recently from Kosho Uchiyama in which he said just that. And everybody who teaches Zen says just that. If thoughts pop into your head, that's not a problem. Even if a lot of thoughts pop into your head, what you're trying to do is not really consider them much. Just kind of let them go. Opening the hand of thought is how he puts it. Kosho Uchiyama puts it. Nishijima Roshi's advice was always to check your posture, and I've slightly modified it from the way he said it. And what I usually say is that if I find myself thinking of a lot of stuff, or my mind is kind of wandering, whatever, in Zazen, then I notice that I look at my posture, and every single time for the last 35 plus years that I have done that, my posture has been going wonky. Like my shoulders are going up. That's the standard thing. When I first started doing Zazen, Tim would sometimes come behind me and he would do posture adjustments and he would push my shoulders down really hard sometimes. And I didn't realize my shoulders were probably up literally like this while I was doing Zazen. That's what it is for me, or sometimes I, slouch or lean. And every time my thoughts are going, my posture is kind of following the thought. So I check my posture again and find that balance point. You're trying to kind of find that spot where you're balancing the meat and bones that are on top of your hips on your hips, on the foundation of your hips, and letting that kind of settle like that. That's what I do. But as I say, the more answers I give to what to do with your mind in shikantaza, the less it's like shikantaza. So just sitting means just sitting. Just try to get into the pure experience of just sitting, and don't worry too much about what you're supposed to do. Everybody is confused. The confusion about what to do in the practice is part of the practice. So that's what I have to say in answer to that. I hope it was worth your 11 minutes or however long I've gone. I really appreciate it. If you want to donate to making me make more videos like this, you can send a donation to the address that you're seeing below. Actually, that's a URL, but then there's a link there. Anyway, whatever, you'll figure it out. That's how I make my living. That is pretty much my sole source of income right now. A little bit trickling in from here and there, but mostly it is your donations. If you're having financial trouble, as I always say, don't donate to me, because I'm not desperate. I'm hanging in there. Everything's, pretty copacetic. But the reason it's copacetic is because people still donate, and I really appreciate those of you who do. Have a good time all the time. See you later. Bye.